We're about to make a notes app where you can take all of your notes and then you can use ChatGPT to basically ask questions about all of your notes. We're going to be using Next.js 15. We're going to be using the OpenAI API. We're going to be using Supabase and Supabase Auth, as well as Prisma. We're going to do all the styling using Shadcn. And then when we're done, we're going to deploy it with Vercel. So by the end of this video, you're going to have a fully functioning app that is actually on the internet. It actually uses AI in the app. So let's take a quick look at what this app is going to look like. So let's bring this into the screen. So as you can see, I'm logged in. It's called Goat Notes. It's legit. So right here, we got an empty note and I can just say, subscribe to Cole Blender. Let me spell that correctly. And then we can create a new note. We got ourselves a new note. This automatically saved while we were typing. I'm gonna show you how to do all of that. And then right here, I can ask AI. I can say, what are my notes about? And then it's thinking, and it's gonna say your note summary. It knows when I created it, last updated, and then it just says subscribe to Cole Blender. So let me put in some more extensive notes and then we'll ask it some questions about that. All right, so right here, I'm gonna paste in some notes that I have made on Docker. And so now that's already saved. So now I can ask the AI and I can say, what are my notes about? And it's going to know, it's going to read all of my notes. So it knows I'm talking about Docker, and then it also knows I have this other note. So I could say something like, I have a test coming up on Docker. Using my notes, give me a 10-question quiz. And so we wait for this, it's thinking, it's doing its thing, and then boom, we have our output right here, and it just came up with a quiz for us. So you can write notes on anything you want, and this is going to basically give you the power of ChatGPT, and it's going to know all about your notes. Oh yeah, and also, this goes without saying, we're obviously going to have light mode, dark mode. We're going to be using Shadcn. It's going to be legit. So enough talk. Let's do it. All right, so let's get this project started. So I use PNPM, so I'm going to say PNPM DLX create next app at latest, and we'll call this Goat Notes. If you're using NPM, then it's just going to be NPX as opposed to PNPM DLX. So we're going to use TypeScript. We're going to use ESLint, Tailwind, yes to source directory, yes app router, yes TurboPack, no to that. So once this thing is done, we're going to CD into Goat Notes, and we're going to open this up in VS Code. So if I open this terminal and I say PNPM dev, or if you're using NPM, you'll do NPM run dev. So we got this thing running. Let's open this up. And you can see we just have our starter template for the Next.js project. So let me get this situated. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just get this into a better starting position. So we're going to come over to the layout. We're going to remove all of this. We're going to remove these fonts. We're going to remove this. And then right here, I'm going to call this Goat Notes. Get rid of this description. Also, the GitHub repo is in the description. So all of the finished code is there, all the resources. I have a couple of pictures, a couple of things. So if you want any of that, it's in the description. Give it a star. I would very much appreciate that. So then we're also going to come over to the page file. We're going to remove all that. We're going to say RFCE. We're going to say homepage. And so now you can see we've got this homepage right here. Also, what I'm going to do in the source directory, I'm going to create a new file called, or a folder called styles. And I'm going to move this global CSS file in there. And then we have to come back to this app layout. And we're going to say @/styles/globals.css. We can also come in here to the public file, remove all of this. We're going to delete this. And then I'm going to add this PNG file to public. This is our logo. This is Godius. This is the mascot. And then also, instead of using this for the favicon, we're going to delete this. And I also have this picture, but as a favicon in the GitHub repo, so you can go and grab that as well. So now you can see we got Godius up here. This is starting to look legit already. Also, I'm going to add auto sorting for Tailwind, which is very handy. So I'm going to say PNPM add -d prettier, and then prettier -plugin -Tailwind CSS. So we're going to run that. And that just added the packages for us. We're also going to have to create a new file, .prettierrc. And we're just going to go like this. We're going to say plugins. And it's going to be an array. And it's going to be prettier dash plugin dash tailwind CSS. And so now if we come here and we say like class name, we'll just say like BG red 400, text blue 300. We'll just say height of 20. We save that and it's going to auto sort it for us. So it's very consistent everywhere throughout the app. I would highly recommend using this. Also, one more little thing we're going to do. We're going to come over to this ESLint file and we're going to add one rule. So we're going to, let me just use that autocomplete. So basically, so this is not correct. This needs to be, it's going to be no unescaped entities. And we're going to set that to off. So basically, if you don't have this and you have something like this, where you use an apostrophe and then you go to try to deploy it to Vercel, this is going to, the linter is going to say, this is not allowed. So that's why we have this rule that basically says you're allowed to use commas or you're allowed to use apostrophes and other things like that. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to add a little bit of Shadcn. So we're going to go to this link. I'll have it in the description. And we're just going to simply copy this command, paste it in. And then we're going to use New York. We're going to use Slate. And yes, we would like CSS variables. And then also what we're going to do, we're going to add dark mode. So just right here, we're going to click dark mode, Next.js. We're going to copy this, paste this. We're going to copy this code right here. And what I like to do, because we're going to have a couple providers. So I'm going to create a folder called providers. And then in here, I'm going to call it theme provider with that casing. And then we're just going to paste that in. And it's very simple. So we're going to copy this. We're going to come into the app.layout file. And then in the body, we're going to paste this. And then we just have to import our theme provider. And so now we have our theme provider. And what's going to happen is it's going to give us this error over and over and over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to this HTML tag and I'm going to say suppress hydration warning. And so now this error message is no longer going to show up. And this error is totally fine. That is how this thing works. So you're totally fine with that. So we're going to come back into Shadcn and we're going to add some toast because we're going to use this throughout our app a lot. So we're going to scroll down here. We're going to come to toast and we're going to copy this command, paste that in. And then we're going to go to the app layout and inside of the theme provider, we're going to add the toaster and we're going to import that from our components folder, which it just got added with that command. And so now we can use this toast throughout the whole app. All right, so now let's add a little bit of UI to this app. So the first thing we're going to add is a header. So we're going to come to the components folder and we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it header.tsx rfce. If that is not working for you, then you need to come to the extensions tab and type in React and get, which one of these? I don't know, maybe both of these. I would get both of those. So in this header, we're going to replace this div with a header. I'm also going to remove this because we don't need it. And inside of this header, we're going to have a link, import this from next link. We're going to give this an href of just slash, so it goes to the home route. And inside of this link, we're going to have an image, import that from next image. And we're going to give this a source equals, and it's going to be /godius.png. If you want that file, it's in the GitHub repo. And then we also need to give it a height of 60, a width of 60. We're going to say alt is logo. And then we're going to give it a class name of rounded full. And then outside of that class name, we're going to say priority. Also, what I'm going to do so we can see these changes is we're going to go into the layout and we're going to import the header. And so now you can see that logo. Also, what I'm going to do is wrap this in a div. And we're going to give this a class name of flex. We're going to say min height screen. We're going to say width full. We're going to say flex call. And then we're going to wrap this children in a main tag. And we're going to say flex1. We're going to say flex call px of 4, p top of 10. And then we're going to say when it gets to xl, we're going to say a px of 8. And so now we've got our header, which is above the main content. So let's go back to our header and let's add a little styling to the header. So this is going to be relative flex height of 24, a width of full, item center, justify between, a background of popover, which is a color that was automatically created when we created Shadcn. If we come over to our globals.css, when we initialized Shadcn, it added all of this stuff for us. And so this is how you work with dark mode, is we call it popover. And so we can see when it's in light mode, this is the color of popover. In dark mode, this is the color of popover. So we're going to add that toggle switch here in just a second, and you'll be able to see how easy it is to work with this. So also we're going to say a px of 3, and then we're going to say small, a px of 8. And I'm also going to add this little glowing thing. So I'm going to say style equals, I'm going to say box shadow, and we're going to say shadow. And so we're going to import this. So in styles, I'm going to create a file called utils.ts. So we're going to come into this file, and I'm just going to paste this. If you want this exact stuff, it's in the GitHub repo. So we're going to save that file. We actually don't need to export this. And then we're going to come back to this header, and we're going to import this shadow. So now, all right, we're getting a little separation. The header's starting to come alive. We're looking good. We're looking good. So also in this link, I'm going to create an h1 tag, and we're going to say goat, and then we're going to say a span tag. And in here, we're going to say notes. So I'm going to come to this link. We're going to make this flex. We're going to say items end, and we're going to give it a gap of 2. Okay. So we're going to come to this h1. We're going to say flex call, a padding bottom of 1, text 2xl, font semi-bold, and then we're going to say a leading of 6, which is basically the line height. All right, so now we got this header link. So if we click on that, we go to the home route. Now we're going to put a couple of buttons over here, like logging in, dark mode, stuff like that. So we're going to come here below the link, and we're going to create a div. We're going to give this a styling. We're going to say flex and gap 4. And then we're going to dynamically render some stuff. So for now, we're just going to say const user equals null. We're going to set this up later, so this actually gets the user using Supabase auth. And then in here, we're going to say user question mark. So if there's a user, this is going to be a logout button, but for now, we'll just show that string. If there's not a user, what we're going to have is a couple of buttons. So we need to add the button from Shadcn. So I'm going to say pmpm dlx shadcn at latest add button. And you can get this command from Shadcn. So you just come back to the Shadcn. I would keep this open. We're going to be using this a lot. Go to the button, and then you can just copy that command. All right, so in here, we're going to have a button. We need to import this. We just added that with the command. And in this button, we're going to have a link that is to log in. And right here in this button, we're going to say as child. So basically this add child, what it's going to do is it's going to make it so it just applies all of the styles to this without actually putting this HTML tag. So we don't want a button tag and then an anchor tag. So when we do this, it's just going to make it look like a button, but it's actually just a link. So we're just going to copy and paste that. And then we're going to create a sign up one. And for this login, we're going to say a variant, and we're going to make this outline. Also, what I'm going to do for this sign up is I'm going to make it be hidden by default. And then when the screen reaches the size of small, it's going to turn into block. So when the screen is super small, like on an iPhone or something, it's going to be gone. But then when it gets large, it'll pop up. And so on the login page, on the login form, there will be a button to go to the sign up. If you want, you could add turn this into a hamburger menu, something basically like this. but I'm just keeping it very simple. All right, now we're going to add the dark mode button. So let's come back to Shadcn, go to dark mode, and scroll down. And here is the dark mode button. So we're going to click the code, we're going to copy that. And then in our components, we're going to create a new file. And we're going to call this dark mode toggle.tsx. And we're just going to simply paste all of that in. As you can see, we need this drop-down menu. So I'm going to say pmpm.dlx shadcn at latest add drop-down menu. And so that's going to add all of the drop-down menu code for us. And so now we can see that that is imported. So we can save this file, come over to the header, and regardless of if the user is logged in or logged out, we're going to display the dark mode toggle. We're going to, and then we're going to import this. For some reason, it's not doing the auto thing for me. So I got to say import. Yeah. Okay. I know why. So this is exporting it like that. I'm going to go like this. Instead of calling this mode toggle, I'm going to call it dark mode toggle. And then I'm going to say export default dark mode toggle. So now this works. All right, so now we go to our website. We've got the button right here. This is already looking legit. So the reason it turned to dark mode is because it defaults to system, which I, of course, am using dark mode. If you're not, what are you doing? So now we can easily switch back and forth. I'm going to be doing this all in dark mode. And we can also see, so if the user is null, it's going to show this. If the user is, let's just say 1 or true, it's going to show this, which is not what we want. So we're going to create a specific component for this. And we're going to call this LogOutButton. So we need to create this component, LogOutButton.tsx rfce. And then we can come and import this. And so now we can come into this LogOutButton. And all it's going to be is a button from Shadcn. So we want to import that. And what this is going to do, we're going to make this show some dynamic content. So we're going to say loading. So if it's loading, we're going to show the loader2 icon, which when you add Shadcn, it automatically adds the Lucid icons library for you, which I use for everything. So we're going to add loader2. And then in here, we're going to say animate spin. So if it's loading, it's going to show that. If it's not loading, it's going to say log out. And so right here, we'll just, for now, well, yeah, we're going to use state. So we'll just do that. And we're going to say loading is going to equal false. And then in order to make this work with use state and other React component hooks, we're going to come up here and say use client. And so now you can see it's going to say log out, but if loading is true, it's going to do that, but we don't want that little shift to happen. So we're going to add a class name right here, and we're just going to simply say width of 24. So it's always going to be fixed. Also, I'm going to add a few more props to this button. We're going to say variant is going to be outline. On click is going to be handle log out. So we're going to create this function. We'll finish this in a second, but let's just add it real quick. Handle log out. We'll just say logging out. And then we're also going to say disabled. This button's going to be disabled when loading is set to true. So if we set this to true, you can see it's going to like make this thing fade out a little bit. And that is because of the Shadcn button. So let's set this back to false. And so we're going to set up Supabase Auth in a little bit. When we do that, we'll be able to write the rest of this function. For now, what we can just do is say set loading to true. At the very bottom, it's going to say set loading to false. And then right here, we can just say await new. Let's actually make this an async function. And then we're going to say await new promise. And we'll let it load for 2 seconds. This is just basically simulating the actual logout. We're going to write a function for that later. And that function is ultimately going to return an error message. And for now, we'll just set this to null. And then we'll say if there's not an error message, we're going to show some toast. So we need to come up here and we're going to say const toast equals used toast, which when we set up our toaster at the very beginning, it came with this hook for us. And then so we can come right here and say toast. And we're going to say a title of logged out, a description, you've been successfully logged out. And then we're going to give it a variant of success, which doesn't exist. So we're going to come into this UI. We're going to come into toast. Let's see. Yes, we're going to come into UI toast.tsx, and we see we have a variant of default and destructive. We're going to add one called success. And all I'm going to do is just say a BG of emerald 700. And so now when we come back to this, this knows that this can be success now. And then also we're going to push it to the home page. So we're going to get the router. We're going to say const router equals use router. You have to make sure that you import this from next/navigation, not next router, next navigation. And then we're going to come down to right after this toast, and we'll just say router.push to the home page. So that's if there's not an error message. If there is an error message, then we'll just show an error toast. And so now we can simulate this. So if we click log out, boom, log out, you've successfully been logged out. Let's see what it's going to look like if there's an error. So we try to log out, and then boom, error, and say just like error logging out. And so this, whatever the error message is going to be displayed in the toast. So we can just leave this like this for now. We'll come back to this once we set up the Supabase auth. We're going to finish this, and it's actually going to be able to log you out. All right. So now let's add the login and sign up pages. And then once we do that, we're going to create a Supabase project, and we're going to set up Supabase auth. So let's come over here to app. And we're going to create a new file. We're going to call this login/page.tsx. And then we're going to say RFCE, and we're going to call this the login page. And so now if we come over to /login, boom, we're at the login page. This is how you make routes in Next.js with the app router. It's very simple. So we're going to come in this div. We're going to give it a class name. We're going to say a margin top of 20, flex1, flex call, and items center. And then what we're going to do, we're going to use the Shadcn card component. So we're going to say pm dlx Shadcn at latest add card. And so what we're going to do is we're going to import this card, and we're going to give this a class name of width full and a max width of medium. And then inside of here, we're going to get the card header, and we're going to give this a class name of margin bottom 4. If you want to know all the different card components, you just simply come over here to card, and they're all right here. And you can change these any way you want. You can also look at the docs and read all about that. So in this card header, we're going to have a card title, import that. And it's just going to say login. And then we're also going to add a class name to this. We're going to say text center. And we're going to say text 3XL. And so the login page and sign up page are going to be almost identical. So what I'm going to do is create a component called auth form. And this is going to be of type equals login. So let's create this component. It's going to be called auth form.tsx RFCE. So we're going to save this, come back to the login page, and import this. And then now everything we change in the auth form, we're going to see. So first thing we're going to do is this is going to expect type. So we're going to say type props equals, and then in here, type, and it's going to either be login or sign up. And so now, what you could do is make this a string, but then it could just be any string. So now this is going to give us auto completion. So if we come here and for the type, if we hit control space, or maybe it's something else on Windows, it's going to show us it can only be one of these two things. So when you're typing stuff and you know it can only be certain strings, you should always do this because it will give you the autocomplete. We're also going to make this a client component. So we're going to say use client. And we're going to come here. We're going to say const is login form. We're going to say type equals login. This is just going to be much easier to type than typing this in everywhere. We're also going to need the router from use router, next navigation, not next router. We're also going to need some toast equals use toast. And then we're going to have a function called const handle submit. And we will write that in a second. And this handle submit is going to expect form data, which is of type form data. So for now, we'll just say log form submitted. All right, so now let's add a little styling. Instead of this being a div, we're going to make this a form, and we're going to say on submit. We're going to say handle submit. Actually, instead of on submit, we're going to make this an action. We're going to use server actions, which are very easy to use and very convenient for the Next.js app router. Yeah, we're going to write a couple of API endpoints throughout this app, and then we're also going to use server actions. So we're going to use both of them. I prefer to use server actions anytime I can. Sometimes you have to use an API route though. All right, so in this form, we're going to say card content. We're going to import that. And then we're going to have a div. And in this div, we're going to have a label, which we do not have yet. So we're going to say pm dlx shadcn at latest. And we're going to add the input. And we're going to add the label. And so we're going to say label. We can now import this. Make sure you import it from ./UI/label. And then that is exactly what we want. And then right here, we're going to put an input. And this is going to have an ID of email, a name of email, a placeholder of enter your email, type email. We're going to make this required. And then we're going to say disabled is going to equal something that's called is pending. And so with server actions, we're going to use something called use transition, which is a hook that gives us a couple of things. And one of those is the is pending. It's just a Boolean, true or false. So while the server action is occurring, this is pending is going to be set to true. So it's basically just, it's going to show our loading state depending on this is pending. So we can actually come up here and we can say use transition. We're going to import that. And that's going to give us two things, is pending and start transition, which is a function. So if we save that, now we can see our form's got a little bit. We're getting there. We're getting there. So we're going to come to this div right here. We're going to give this a class name. We're going to say flex call. And we're going to say space of y 1.5. And we're going to save that. And then we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this down. And so you can see, okay, we got this twice. We're going to change this to the password, but first we're going to come to this card content. We're going to add a class name. We're going to say grid. We're going to say a width of full, items center, and a gap of 4. And so now everything here that says email, we're going to change to password. And you can see when I did that, this knew to be uppercase because I'm using this extension called like something case, multiple cursor case preserve. I use this all the time. Very handy. So now we can save that and our form is starting to look a little better. Now we're going to add the button. So we're going to come right here and we're going to say card footer. And in this card footer, we're going to have a button. We're going to import that. And we're going to display if it's pending, so the loading state. We're going to have the loader2, and we're going to say class name animate spin if it's not pending. Then we're going to say if it's the login form, show the word login, otherwise show sign up. So when we save this, it's going to kind of bracket this off a little bit for us. So basically it's going to say if it's pending, then show this. If it's not pending, then show this entire thing, which is its own ternary statement, which isn't necessarily the cleanest or the prettiest, but this is fine. If you had to do more than this, I would not do that. So we're going to come to this button. We're going to say class width full, And then the card footer, we're going to say margin top of 4, flex call, and then we're going to say a gap of 6. And then beneath this button, we're going to have and this is going to have a class of text extra small. And then in this, we're going to say is login form. And if it is the login form, then we're going to say don't have an account yet. If it is the sign up form, then we're going to say already have an account ? And we can actually keep that little space in there. And then in the same p tag, we're going to have a link. Make sure you import this from Next Link and not Lucid React. And then we can do that autocomplete. And then we got to get the closing tag. And in here, we're going to say is login form. It's going to say sign up. Otherwise, it's going to say login. And then for this link, we can also give it a class name. And we're going to make this a dynamic class name. We're going to say text blue 500. And we're going to give it an underline. And then we're going to say if is pending is true, pointer events none. And then we're also going to give it an opacity of 50. So when is pending is true, you won't be able to click this. Right now, this is going to work, except we haven't created that page. All right, so we're going to write this handle submit in a second. We're going to set up our Supabase auth. But first, let's just come over to app and let's create a new file. We'll call it sign-up/page.tsx. And we're just going to come to the login page. We're going to copy this. We're going to paste it in here. And everywhere that says login is going to be sign up. And so now we can save this. And so now if we click the sign up, it goes to the sign up page. All right. So now we're going to come over to Supabase and we're going to create a new project. And I'm going to call this Goat Notes, period. We're going to generate a password. We're going to copy this. We're going to come back to our project. We're going to create a new file called .env.local. And then we're going to just call this db password equals, just save that. We're going to need this in a second. So I'm going to create this new project. We're going to wait for that to get created. All right, so we can see this is setting up project. So we're just going to wait a couple of seconds, wait for this to get fully ready. It's going to take you to a different page and then I'll show you what to do. All right. So we're going to use Supabase for auth as well as our database. So eventually we are going to need this connection string. So we're just going to get it right now. So click connect and then scroll down to this bottom one. You're going to copy that. And then we're going to come into our .env.local file and we're going to call this database URL. And we're going to paste that in. And then this thing right here that says your password, we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this in. And so now we can actually get rid of this thing. So we've got this, and then we're also going to come over to project settings. We're going to go to database. We're going to go to project settings. We're going to go to API. Look. And then we're going to get this URL. We're going to copy this. We're going to come over here and we're going to call this Supabase URL. We're going to paste that in. We're going to get this right here. We're going to copy this Supabase anon key. Paste that in. Also, we're going to need next public base URL, and we're going to set this equal to this local host. We don't need this right now, but we're going to need this eventually. So just type this in real quick. So if we click on authentication, there's a couple of things you're going to want to configure. So allow new users to sign up. We'll set this to true for now. We may eventually want to turn that off if for whatever reason. We got the password length. Another thing that you're eventually, if you want to actually use this as a production website, you're going to want to enable custom SMTP because as you can see, the service has rate limits and is not meant to be used for production apps. So just for this simple thing, we're just going to use the Supabase email system that they have. But if you want this to actually scale and be used by users, you're going to need to use something like I use SendGrid. I have a video on how to set that up. I'll put it in the description. So now what we're going to do, we're going to head over to these docs, which are in the description. And this is how to set up the auth. So right here, I'm not going to copy that because I'm using PNPM, but we're going to want to add these packages. So I'm going to say PNPM add, paste that in. And then it says to set up the environment variables. We already did that. Don't let anyone see these. It says to use next public we're not going to use next public. Because when you do this, this exposes the keys to the client. Since we're not going to be using any Supabase on the client, there's no point in doing this. All it does is make it a little bit less secure. So do not include next public. We already did it correctly. So we're going to come over here to step 3. We're going to go to this server and we're going to copy this. Let's make this a little bit smaller. And then we're going to come into our source directory and we're going to create a new file and we're going to call this auth/server.ts. And we're going to paste this code in. We can remove this comment and then we're going to add another function in here in a second. But first, what we're going to do, we're going to scroll down a little bit. We're going to hook up middleware. We're going to use middleware because it's basically going to look at if the user is logged in and they try to go to the login route, the middleware is going to see that. So basically what middleware is on every single call to the server, it first goes through the middleware. So it's basically like a layer of protection or security, or if you want something to happen, like if you wanted to like log some information to like some other service, you could handle that in the middleware. So we're going to copy this and in the source directory, we're going to create a new file called middleware.ts. And you have to make sure this is spelled correctly. If it's not spelled correctly, it's not going to work. And then they say to make a different folder. I'm not going to do that. So we're going to copy that. We're going to paste this and we can remove all of these comments. So let's get rid of all this, get rid of this. And then we're going to move these imports up here. We don't need this. And then we can also remove this. And then this thing that says options, we don't use that. So we can also remove that. And so now you can see when we save this, it says compiled middleware. So this function right here, update session. So this is the main thing, is export async function middleware. Next.js knows that when you have a file called middleware.ts and you export the middleware function, that's a special function and it knows to run whatever you put in that. So we have this update session. And then this right here is also something that Next.js knows about. This is basically saying what routes to apply the middleware to. So we're just going to leave this as the default, but you could make it so like don't run middleware on the home page or only run middleware on routes that start with /auth. And so what we need to do is change this. This says next public. We're not using next public. So just delete that. And then also we're going to get rid of this right here. And then for now, we can just comment this out. Let me also comment this out. So we will be doing this. We will be messing with this a little bit later. And let me just show you so I can console log middleware ran. So this is going to log every time this middleware runs, it's going to log that. So if we come to this and we go to the login route, yep, middleware ran. Let's go to that route. Yep, middleware ran. Yep. So we have it set up so every single route change, this function is going to run. So we're going to set that up later. So now what we're going to do, we're going to come back to this auth/server file and we're going to change this just a little bit. We're going to say const client equals, and then we're going to say return client. And the only reason I'm doing that is to show you what this Supabase thing is going to be returning. So actually first let's get rid of this next public. I have forgot to remove that before, and it's a very, very difficult bug to catch. So client period, you can see we have the auth. We have all of these things. What we're going to be using is auth. And so what else does auth have? It's got all of these things. And what we're going to want to use is get user. That's how we're going to get the user. But we just simply want to return the client. That was just to show you what the client is. So in this same file, we're going to say export async function get user. And this is going to use this function right here, create client. We're going to say const, we're going to destructure the auth from the create client function. And then we're going to say const user object equals auth dot get user. And then we're going to say if user object dot error. That looks pretty stupid. So we're going to come here. I got to add await right here. And then we can remove the await right there. Let's also remove that parenthesis. So we're going to say if the user object error exists, we're going to console.error the error, and then we're going to return null. There's no user. Otherwise, we're going to return the user object .data.user. So we're going to be using this everywhere throughout our app. Anytime we want to get the user's information, we're going to use this function, get user. All right, so now that we have set this up, we can now create users and log in with users. What we have to do is go to our auth form, and we're now going to write this handle submit function. So we're going to say start transition in this. This has to be async. And the reason we use start transition is because it allows us to show, if we didn't use this, then the moment we click handle submit, the entire UI is going to freeze up. If we use start transition, it allows us to show like loading states while the server action is running. So I use start transition for every single server action I use. So we're going to say const email equals form data get email. We're also going to get the password. And then we're going to say let error message. We're going to say let title, and we're going to say let description, because we're going to use this for our toast depending on if it's a login or a sign up. And then we're going to say if is login form, the error message is going to equal await, and make sure to put that in parentheses, login action, which we have not written yet. We're going to make this in a second, and we're going to pass in the email and the password. And then this is going to return the error message. The title is going to be logged in, and the description is going to be you have been successfully logged in. So that's if it's the login form. If it is not the login form, which means it's a sign up form, we're going to do some other stuff. So let's just paste this, and instead of the login action, it's going to be sign up action. And then instead of logged in, it's going to be signed up. And then this is going to be check your email for a confirmation link. And then below this, we're going to say if there is not an error message. Yes, this is exactly what we want. If there's not an error message, show some toast that has the title, the description, and this is going to be successful. We're also going to use our router, which we imported right here. And instead of push, we're going to say replace, because we don't, if you say push, then they press the back button, they can go back to the login page. We don't want that. We want that page to be removed. And then if there is an error message, we're going to just show some toast with the error message. So now this function is going to work as soon as we write these server actions. So we're going to come over here to source, and I'm going to create a new file, call it actions/users.ts. And at the top of this page, we have to say use server. That's how you're telling Next.js this is a server action. And we're going to say export const login user action. And then we're going to have a try catch block. So if there's an error, we're going to return handle error, which is a function that we will write in a second, because we're going to use this for all of our server actions. We're going to use this same error handling. So in this try catch, we're going to say const, and we're going to get the auth object from await create client, which is that function we wrote earlier for Supabase. And then we're going to say const error equals await auth dot sign in with password. And then we just pass in the email and the password. And then below this, we're going to say if error, throw the error. And then that's going to trigger this code right here. If there's not an error, we're going to return error message is null. And so this function is going to return error message with the error message. So we can write this function real quick. So let's come to libutils, and we're going to say export const handle error. It's going to be expecting an error, which is of type unknown, because that is the default type of these errors. Well, in the catch block, it's always unknown. So it's going to be of type unknown. And we're going to say if error, instance of error, we're going to return the error message. Otherwise, we're just going to return an error occurred. And this needs an equal sign right here. So now if we come back to this, we can import the handle error. And so now that we have this login action, we can just paste this right here and call this sign up action. And instead of this being login user action, this is just going to be called login action. And so we're just going to, instead of sign up, or instead of sign in, this is going to be sign up. And we're going to destructure the error as well as some data. And we're right here, we're going to say const user ID equals data.user.id. And we're going to say, if there's not a user ID, throw an error. And we'll say error signing up. And the reason we want that user ID is because we're going to, so when you sign up, there are two things. So in Supabase, there's this thing called authentication. This is going to show all of the users. But if we want to store a bunch of information about the users, you should not store it in this. You should create a table called users. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. When we sign up, this creates the user using Supabase auth. But then right after we do that, we want to also create a user in our users table. And so right here, we'll just say add user to database, and we will do this later. For now, this is good. So if we come back to our auth form and we import login action, import signup action, this should now work, assuming we did everything correctly. So let's make this a little bit larger. Oh, actually, I need to go to the header first. Let's see. Let's go to the header. And instead of this user being like this, so first of all, we need to make this an async function. We're going to say const user equals await get user. And so we have an error. Let's see. All right, so this doesn't matter at all. So we're going to go to sign up. We're going to enter an email. We're just going to make a password simple. We're going to click sign up. Boom, signed up. Check your email. So let's go check our email. Come to our email. We see we have the confirm your sign up. So we click this link. It takes us back here. You can configure that to actually take you to any route you want. We can look at changing that in a bit. So now we go to login. We type in our email, our password. Notice up here, it's showing this because we're not logged in. We click login. Boom. We are now logged in and we have an actual user. If we go to Supabase, we can see we have this user. And so now we can log in, sign up. Now we can write the log out function. So if we go back to this actions users, I'm just going to simply copy this, paste this, call this log out action. I'm going to do a capital O. And this does not require any parameters. And this is going to be auth sign out. We don't have to pass anything into this. And then if there's an error, throw an error. Otherwise, we're good. So let's go back to our LogOutButton. I actually am going to change the name of this. I want the capital O. Doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. Save this, rename this file. And then in our header, I'm going to call this the LogOutButton. Hold on, I'm going to reset my TypeScript server, see if that gets rid of that error. Okay, so now this is working. Let's go to our logout button. And then instead of this, await new promise, we're going to say const error message is going to equal await log out action. And so now we should be able to log out. We log out. It worked. If this is some error, it doesn't matter. We're good. We can now log in, log out, sign up. We can do all that stuff. All right. So now that we got auth set up, now we can set up our database, and we're going to be using Prisma and Supabase together. So let's go ahead and set up Prisma. So we're going to go to these docs. I'll put these in the description, and we're just simply going to copy this code. We're going to come over to our project, and we're going to create a file called db/schema.prisma. and we're going to paste this in. And so we see right here, env database URL. We need to make sure that this database URL is this. So these need to have the same spelling, because this right here, this connection string that we got from Supabase earlier, this is how Prisma is going to know how to connect to Supabase. So we need to make sure these are the same. So we're going to make a few changes to these. So we're not going to have any posts. We're going to have notes. And instead of using IDs, we're going to use UUID. So we're going to say string. And then right here, we're going to call this UUID. And then I'm actually just going to get rid of all of this. And we're going to say text is going to be a string. Author is going to be a user. And we're going to say at relation. And we're going to say fields. We're going to say author ID. And it's going to reference ID. So beneath this, we're going to say author ID. And that's going to be a string. And so to make this work, we need to come into the user, and this needs to be a string. And then instead of auto increment, we're going to put UUID. So basically this thing knows, let me make this a little bit nicer. So there's not going to be a field when we go into the database. There's not going to be an author field for a note. There's going to be an author ID field. And this is how in Prisma, how we say what this author ID is and the relation that it has in the data. And then below this, we're also going to have created at, and we're going to have updated at. And this is also going to default to now. We can copy this, put this at the bottom, and then we can get rid of names. So we just have a very simple setups. And so this as well is not going to be a field in our database. This is just how we say the user is going to have a relationship with these notes. And so it knows that each user is going to be associated with possibly a list of notes. So it's a one-to-many relationship. So now we're going to come over to these docs, also linked below. And inside of this DB folder, we're going to create a file, and we're going to call it prisma.ts. And we're going to copy this, paste this. I'm going to remove this. And we need to add the Prisma client. So I'm going to say pm add at prisma/client. And then we need to do one more thing. So we need to come into package JSON, and we're going to create a script. And we're going to call this migrate. And this is going to be pnpm dlx prisma. If you're using npm, then this should just be npx prisma. And we're going to say generate, and we're going to say double ampersand. And we're going to write a little script to basically tell Prisma, because Prisma, this right here, is expecting this to be in .env. But with Next.js, we're going to use .env.local. So I need to write a little script that basically tells Prisma it's in .env.local. So we're going to say, so I'm going to type in this script, and then we're going to say pnpm dlx prisma migrate dev. And then also below this, we're going to say Prisma, and we're going to have an object here, and we're going to say schema, and then we're going to tell Prisma where our prisma.schema file is. And this should be db, because Prisma assumes that it's just in schema.prisma at the root of the project. We want to put it right here, so we need to do this. And so we see we have this error right here. So we need to run this script first. So we need to say pnpm migrate, or if you're using npm, it's npm run migrate. So we're just going to call this init. And so now if we go to our Supabase, we go to table editor, we see we have a note and we have a user. And so now our project is set up to Supabase. As for this little error, I don't know what's going on here. We'll come to this in a second. This should be working. When we go to use Prisma, if this causes a problem, we'll figure that out. It should work, but we're going to figure it out, period. So the first thing we're going to use Prisma for is, I told you when we did our sign up. So let's go to our actions, users, our sign up action. So we're going to add the user to the database. So we're going to say await prisma.user.create. And then we're going to say data. And we're going to say ID equals user ID. And then we're also going to pass in the email. So now I'm going to log out, and I'm going to sign up with a different email, and we'll see if this works. So if we go over to Supabase and we look in the user, we see that it was not created, but the user was. Okay, so yeah, I need to figure out why this is not working. Okay, so the reason this was not working is we need to first do pnpm dlx prisma generate. If you're using npm, then it would just be npx prisma generate. So if you run that, this should now work. When you run generate, it adds all of the types and all of this information to your node modules. So now if we go back to this server action, yes, now when I type this in, this should be included in the autocomplete. So I'm going to come into my Supabase users. I'm going to delete this one. I'm then going to go back to our project, and then I'm going to sign up, type in the email. So now this should, let's see. Okay, maybe this didn't go through all the way or something. Okay, let's refresh this. We're going to use this email. We're going to sign up. Okay, so we're going to wait a second, and then we're going to do this, and it's going to work. The fuck is going on? Okay, so some weird things were going on. So I'm going to go to the user. This is in the database. This is the table editor. I deleted that user. Let's go back to authentication. Let's delete the user here. And now this is going to work. So now if we go to Supabase, we refresh this, we see in auth, we have this user. But then we also have in our table editor, in users, we have this user. And this is how we're going to associate all of the notes with the user. All right, so when you're using Prisma, you need to make sure that if some things are going wrong, like how this was not importing, and then so we see that we have this thing note, this thing user, when we run the generate script, this creates all of these types and all of this stuff, and it puts it in the node modules. So if you're having any trouble, like later you'll see, we use this note as a TypeScript type, user as a TypeScript type. If these things are not showing up, you need to use the Prisma generate command, and that will do it for you. That's how you have to do it. All right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this user again in the table editor. I'm going to come to the authentication. I'm going to delete all of these users, and we're going to start from scratch because now we have this properly set up. So I'm going to sign up. I'm going to enter my email, and this is going to send me an email. So we're going to confirm our email. We're going to log in. We're successfully logged in. If we go to this, we will now see in the authentication, we have this user with this email, and then also in our table editor, in our user, we have this same user. So now that we have our user set up and we have our connection to our database, now we can start adding the functionality of creating notes, updating notes, all that. So first thing we're going to do is create the sidebar, which is going to show all of our notes. We'll be able to select different notes. We'll be able to delete notes. So we're going to use the Shadcn sidebar. So let's do that. So we're going to come over to Shadcn. We're going to scroll down to the sidebar, and we're going to run this. Make this a little bit smaller. And then let's see if it automatically does this. Maybe not. Let's go to the styles globals. We can see, looks like it automatically added that for us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the sidebar provider. We're going to go into our layout.tsx. We're going to wrap all of this in the sidebar provider. So we're going to import this, and then we're going to have something called app sidebar. And so we need to come back to this Shadcn, and that's exactly what this is right here. So we're going to copy this, and then in our components, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call this app sidebar.tsx. We're going to paste this in, save that, come back over here, and we're going to import this. And so this is doing some weird stuff because right here, it was asking me these questions about Shadcn, so I have to finish this. So no, I do not want to overwrite the button. And that should have, do I want to overwrite that? No. Okay, now that's going to work. And I don't like how this sidebar is this color. So we're going to come into globals, and I'm just going to take the background, and we're going to go to the sidebar background, and we're going to make them the same thing. So now this is going to be the same color as everything else. So let's go to the app sidebar and we're going to customize this. So actually I like all of my things to be the same. So I'm going to say async, and then down here I'm going to say export default, and then we have to come back in this layout, get rid of that import, and then import it the new way. You don't have to do that. So in this app sidebar, we're going to say const user equals get user. And then we're also going to say let notes, which is going to be of type note. And this comes from Prisma client. And remember, we get that from running the Prisma generate command. And we're going to set this to an empty array. And then we're going to say if there's a user, we're going to say notes equals await Prisma. Make sure you're importing that from this. You might be able to import that from this as well. We want it from the one that we wrote. We're going to say Prisma note. We're going to say find many. And then we're going to say where the user ID. Well, this is just going to be, or this is author ID, where author ID equals the user ID. I need to make sure that I come up to this get user input await. And then we're also going to say order by. We're going to say updated at in descending order. So then we're going to come down, we're going to edit this a little bit. So this sidebar header, we're going to get rid of that. So we can get rid of that from here as well. And the sidebar content, we're going to say class, and we're going to say custom scroll bar. And so I wrote some CSS. I'm going to paste it in right here. If you want this, it is in the GitHub repo. So we're going to come back to this, and we're just going to get rid of this, and then in here in the sidebar content, we're going to create a sidebar group. And in that group, we're going to have a sidebar group label, and we need to import this. And in this label, we're going to say user. If there's a user, it's going to say your notes. Otherwise, we're going to have a p tag. And inside of that p tag, we're going to have a link from next link, and it's going to look just like this. We're going to actually go to this link. We're going to say class name. We're going to say underline. And then instead of this space, we're going to just make it one word. And then we're going to come to this sidebar group label. We're going to add a little styling. We're going to say a margin bottom of 2, margin top of 2, and text large. And then below this, I'm going to say if there's a user, we're going to display sidebar group content. And we're going to pass in the notes. And this is going to be a custom component. So come up here and remove this as well. And then we're going to go to components, and we're going to create sidebar group content.tsx RFCE. And this is going to be a client component, and we're going to say type props equals, and it's going to expect notes, which is of type note and array. And then right here, we're going to get the notes. We're going to set this to type props. And so now we come back to this app sidebar, and we can import this from components, not components UI sidebar, but this one right here, the one that we made. And so we're going to come in here. We're just going to simply say log the notes, and then we're going to say your notes here. So we're first going to set up creating a note, reading notes, things like that. And then once we actually have some notes, we're going to create this component. All right. So we're going to get this home page dialed in a little bit. So we're going to come over to page.tsx, and we're going to start making this actually look like the finished app. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to say class name, and we're going to say flex height of full, flex call, items center, gap of 4. And inside of this, we're going to have a div, and we're going to have a class name. We're going to say flex width of full, max width of 4 XL, justify end, and a gap. So we're going to come up here. We're going to make this an async function. We're going to say const user equals await get user. And before that, we're going to say const note ID param is going to equal, we're going to say parentheses, await search params. And then we're going to say dot note ID. And so these search params come from right here. So in Next.js 15, this is how this is done. So if you have a server-side component and you want the search params or the route or things like that, you get them from right here. Whereas if you're in a client component, you use the use search params hook. So this is how this is done in Next 15. So we're going to say search params, and this is a promise. And in this promise is going to be an object, and we're going to say key. This is going to be in brackets, key string. This is, and I got this directly from the docs. So if you want to know more about that, just go to the Next.js docs and type in server component search params. And this, I just copied and pasted this straight from there. So now we have our note ID param right here, and we have our user. And what we're going to do, I'm going to say const note ID equals array dot is array note ID param. So basically, because of how this type is, this could be an array. So we're going to say if this is an array, we're going to get the note ID param, and we're going to get the first one. It's probably never going to be an array, but this is just to make this type safe. And then we're going to say if it's not an array, we just want the note ID param, and we want this to be not undefined. So I'm going to put a bang right there, and then I'm going to say otherwise a string. So now this is for sure going to be a string. This thinks this is certainly going to be a string. And the way that we've set this up, this is going to be a string, because later in the middleware, we're going to write some stuff that makes it so there is always a note ID in the URL. So now that we have the note ID, we're going to say const note equals, we're going to say await Prisma. We're going to import that. We're going to say note dot find unique, and we're going to say where, and we're going to say ID is note ID, and also the author ID is the user ID, because we only want people to see their own notes. So we are now done with this page. We just have to add these components. The first thing that we'll do is just add these buttons. So we're going to come to the components. We're going to create a new file. I'm going to call this AskAIButton.tsx, RFCE. This is going to be a client component. And then we're going to say type props equals, and this wants the user, which is of type user. And we don't want it from Prisma client. We want this from Supabase. So we have to import this from this. Make sure you import the user from this and not from Prisma. And so right here, we're going to say the user. This comes from props. And then just to get this error to go away, we'll just log the user.email. And so for now, we're just going to keep this like this, because we're going to add a lot of logic to this later once we get the AI set up. And actually, on that note, we're going to set up our OpenAI account right now, because when you add money to it, so what you have to add a minimum of $5. And so when you add that money, it takes anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes for it to actually start working. So we're going to set that account up right now, so that when we're actually setting up the AI, it's just going to work. So we're going to go to OpenAI API, and we're going to just click the top one, and you're going to create an account. So once you create your account, you're going to click on this little gear right here, and then you're going to come down to API keys. This is where you create your new secret key. So we can actually do that now. We're going to create our new secret key. We're going to call this goat notes, and we're going to create this secret key. We're going to copy this. We're going to come over to our .env.local, and we're going to call this OpenAI API key. We're going to paste that in. So once you create that API key, you're going to come over here to billing, and you're going to add a credit balance. You have to do a minimum of $5. I would just do $5 for now. So you're going to add all your payment information, all of that. Then also, you should come to limits and make sure that this is at some number greater than 0. I don't know how this is when you first start it, but just make sure this is some number. And also, if you come back to billing, you want to make sure, at least for now, that auto recharge is off. So basically, when I use up all of this $5, it's just not going to work anymore. If you were to make this a legitimate business, then obviously you're going to want this auto recharge to be turned on. But for now, make sure this is turned off. Add $5 to your account right now, because by the time we actually start adding it, you're going to want that money to be ready. All right, so now that we did that, we can come back to our project. We can come back to this and we can now import this AskAIButton. And let's actually go back in there. This could be user or null. And then we'll just add a question mark right there, come back here. So let's create a new component called NewNoteButton.tsx RFCE. And this is also going to be a client component. And we're going to say type props equals, we're going to have a user, which is of type user or null. And then this, we're going to get the user, set the props. And for now, I'm just going to say log the user email. Come back here. We're going to import this. And now let's just make this NoteTextInput component so we don't have these errors. NoteTextInput.tsx RFCE. This is going to be a client component. We're going to say type props, and this is going to expect the note ID, which is a string, and the starting note text, which is also a string. And then right here, we'll get the note ID and the starting note text. Those are the props. So let's come back to this and let's import this. Okay, so now these errors are gone, and now we can start building these. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to say const. We're going to get the note ID that is in the params. We're going to say equals use search params, and we're going to get note ID. And if this is not there, then we're going to just set it to an empty string. And then we're going to say const. We're going to destructure the note ID and set note ID. And this is going to be from use note, which is a custom hook. We're going to use the context API, and we're going to create a global state to store the current note text in, so that when we are writing our note right here, the notes on the side, it will update live. So like it'll have the first couple words of the note, and as we are changing the note right here, this is going to update along with it. So we'll add this in a second. We're going to create a function called handle update note. And we'll fill this out in a second. First, we're going to come to this. Instead of a div, this is going to be a text area, which we need to add. So we're going to say pmpm dlx shadcn at latest. And we're going to add text area. And so now we can import the text area, which is going to be a self-closing tag. And in this text area, we're going to have a value equals note text. We're going to have on change is going to be handle update note. And we're going to get this type. We're going to put E right there. And then if you hover over this, it gives you the type that you need. And so right here, we're going to say E. And then we're going to put that in right there. And then we're going to get rid of this. And for the placeholder, we'll say type your notes here. And then we're going to add some styling to this. So we're going to add the custom scroll bar, margin bottom of 4, height of full, max width 4XL, resize of none, border, a padding of 4, placeholder, text muted foreground. We're going to say focus visible. The ring will be 0. We're going to say focus visible ring offset 0. So now we're going to come inside this function and we're going to say const text equals e.targetValue, and we're going to set note text to the text. And then we're going to come up here and we're going to say let update timeout. And this is going to be node.js.timeout. And so the reason we're using this is because when you're typing, it's not just going to save on every single keystroke. It's going to save after you don't do anything for like a second or two. And this is called debouncing. So we're going to say clear timeout. Every time someone presses a key, it's going to clear the current timeout. And then we're going to reset the timeout to a new timeout. And this is going to be update note action. And this is going to expect the note ID in the text. And then we're going to say debounce timeout. And we're going to use this value somewhere else in our project. So we're going to come down here to lib and we're going to say constants.ts. And we're going to say export const debounce timeout. We're going to set this equal to 1000 milliseconds. So now if we come in here, we can import this. This is not correct. This should be note text and set note text. So we need to create a use effect right here. So we're going to say use effect. We're going to say anytime the note ID changes that is in the params, we need to make sure that we update the global note text to reflect that. So we're going to say if note ID param equals note ID, then we're going to set note text to the starting note text. So basically this says, well, we need to come down here and we need to say note ID param, and then also the note ID because we use that, and the set note text. We also need to pass in the starting note text. We're not actually looking for when this changes. This will change a split second after this changes. This is going to be the first thing that changes. So when we change the note that we're editing, this starting note text is immediately going to change. And then because this is a hook and it's in a client component, this is going to take a split second to run. So that's why we want the starting note text in the dependency array. In fact, I'm going to move this to the front because that is the most important one. We just put these in there because it's a React best practice to put all variables that are inside the use effect in the dependency array. So now we've got two things we need to do. We need to create this use note hook and context, and then we also need to add this update note action. So first we're going to do this. So we're going to come into providers and we're going to create note provider.tsx. So at the top of this, we're going to say use client, and we're going to say type note provider context type equals, we're going to say note text, which is of type string, and then set note text, which is that type. And then right here, we're going to say export const note provider context, which is going to equal create context, which we import from React. And this is going to be of type note provider context type. And then inside of this, we set the default values. And then right here is where we write our function for our note provider. And this is going to expect the children because we're going to wrap our app in this. And then we're just going to say use state, and we're going to say note text. And we're going to set this to an empty string. And then right here, we're going to say return. We're going to say note provider context dot provider. And the value is going to equal these things right here. And we also need to come at the bottom and we need to say export default note provider. So we're going to wrap our app in this provider. And this basically gives this value, note text, can be accessible everywhere because this is a component that is outside of everything. So everything inside of it is able to see what is the note text. So in order to actually get this note text, we are going to create a custom hook called useNote. And this is also going to use the client. And we're going to have a function called useNote. And we're going to say context equals use context for the note provider context. And then we're going to say if there's no context, we're going to throw an error that just says use note must be within a note provider. And then we're going to return the context. And then we need to make sure to export default use note. So now we can import this hook right here. But if we try to use this, we're going to get that error because we need to wrap our app in the provider. So we need to come to layout.tsx. And outside of this sidebar provider and this toaster, we're going to have the note provider. And so now we're going to be able to use this global state. So now right here, we have the note text. That's all this stuff. And then when we update it right here, this is updating it, and we're going to use this use note hook in the sidebar. So if we are editing a note and we change all this stuff, you're going to see it in the sidebar as well. So the sidebar is always showing the most up-to-date version of the note. So now we need to write this update note action. So we're going to come to actions. We're going to create a new file called notes.ts. And at the top of the file, we need to say use server. And I'm going to go to these users notes, and I'm just going to copy this login action because it's very similar. And I'm going to paste this. And instead of calling this login action, we're going to call this update note action. And instead of these, it's going to expect the note ID, which is a string, and the text, which is a string. And then inside of here, we can get rid of a few of these things. We can import this handle error. And then right here, we're going to say const user equals await get user. Make sure to import this. And then we're going to say, if there's not a user, throw an error. You must be logged in to update a note. And then we're going to say await Prisma. Import that. We're going to say note.update. And we're going to say where the ID is equal to the note ID. And then the data we're going to pass in is the text. So now this update note action is going to work properly. So let's import this. And now we can update a note. Every single time we type something, this function runs. And it basically says because we have debounce time set to 1 second, it's going to say in 1 second, run this function. But then like a split second later when we type something else, this runs again, which says clear the timeout. So the previous update note action that was going to run in a second has been canceled, and it's been updated with a newer version of that. And so as you're typing, this process is continuously happening where it's creating a new update note action to occur in a second right after deleting the previous one. So you're typing, you stop. If a second goes by without typing, then this update note action is actually going to run. So now we need to actually create a note so that we can see this in action. So we're going to go to the new note button and we're going to get this working. All right. So first thing, let's make this actually look like the button. So we're going to import a button from Shadcn, and this is going to be, we're going to have a loading state. So we're going to say loading. If it's loading, then have loader to animate spin. Otherwise, it's going to say new note. So let's import this, and then let's save that, let that format. And then also in this button, we're going to say on click, and we're going to have a function called handle click new note button. And then we're going to say variant of secondary, a class name of width 24. And this is going to be disabled when it's loading. So now we need to write this function, but first let's create some state for the loading. This starts off as false. And then we have the function handle click new note button. And this is going to be an async function. So we're going to say if there's no user, we're going to send them to the login page. So we're actually going to come up here. We're going to say const router equals use router from next navigation. And then right here, we're going to say router.push login. Else, so if they are logged in, we're going to set loading to true. And then we're going to create a UUID using the UUID package. So we need to say pm add UUID. And then right here, we need to say import, and we're going to say v4 as UUID v4 from UUID. And then this UUID is going to equal UUID v4. And then we're going to say await, create, note, action. And all we need to do is pass in the UUID. And then after that, we're going to say router.push, and it's going to send them to the route. And then we're going to say router.push, and we're going to say slash question mark, and we're going to say note ID equals the UUID. And once we do that, then we're going to have some toast. So let's come up here and import toast. Toast equals use toast. Let's import that. So we're going to say, if it is successful, we're going to say new note created. Description, you've created a new note, make it whatever you want. And then variant, we're going to say success. And then after this, we're going to say set loading to false. So now the only thing we need to do is create the create note action. So we're going to come up here to notes, and we can just copy and paste that. And we're going to call this create note action. And the create note action just expects a UUID. So right here, well, it's just going to be the note ID. So right here, we're going to say you must be logged in to create a note. And then we're going to say Prisma note create. And then we're just going to pass in the data, which is that. So now we should be able to create a note. So we're going to come back over here. We're going to import this create note action. So if we did this all correctly, we should be able to create a new note. So I create new note. It says new note created. So let's go to our database. Let's go to the notes, and we can see we have a new note created. So let's go back to this. And so now if we type, we can actually see, boom, it just fired off this update note. And now if we come over here and refresh this, we can see the text is now updated. And you can see, if you look right here in the terminal while we're typing, you'll see just as we type, nothing's happening. And then I wait and I stop typing for a couple seconds or like a second, and then this thing runs. And so now if I create another new note, it's saving the current note, boom. And now we have another new note. So if I refresh this, we can see we have this note updated plus our new note. So now that we can create our notes and update our notes, we're going to add all of our notes on the sidebar. And then when we click on these notes, it's going to take us. And when we click on these notes, it's going to change the note ID in the URL, which is then going to make this show the current note. And then we'll also add a delete button to each of these notes. All right, so let's get this sidebar going. So let's go to this sidebar group content, and we are now going to fill this out. So let's first get this HTML set up. So this is going to be sidebar group content, and we're going to call this Shadcn because we're going to import this from Shadcn, but we're going to rename it. So sidebar group content as sidebar group. So this is how you can rename an import. And inside of this, we're going to have a div. And in that div, we're going to have a search icon. I'm going to say class name absolute left to size of 4. we're creating our search bar right now. For this, we can say relative flex item center. And then below this, we're going to have our input from Shadcn. We're going to say class name. We're going to say BG muted and a padding left of 8. So there's space for our search icon. And then placeholder, we're going to say search your notes. And then the value is going to equal search text, and then on change is going to be that. So we can come up here and we can now say that. And so now we see we have our search bar. And this thing is way too small. I meant to type in size 4. So now, boom, we can search all of our notes and it's going to immediately filter through all of the notes that we have right here. So below this, we're going to have our sidebar menu. This is going to have a class of margin top 4. And then in here, we're going to show all of the filtered notes. So let's set this search thing up to work. So first we're going to say use state. And we're going to say local notes. And this is going to equal notes. And then we're going to say use effect. And we're going to say when the notes change, we're going to say set local notes to the notes. And then below this, we are going to do a fuzzy search. So we're going to use a library called fuse.js for that. So we're going to say pm add fuse.js. So now we can say const filtered notes equals, and we're going to say if there is a search text, then we want fuse. We need to import this. So we're going to say import fuse from fuse.js. And actually, before we do this, we need to come up here and we need to create this function called fuse. So we're going to say fuse equals use memo. And we're going to return new fuse local notes. And then we're going to say the keys that we're looking for are text. This is what we're matching it. So it's each note, it's note.text. And then the threshold, we're going to set this to 0.4. So if we hover over this, it says 1 would match anything and 0 requires a perfect match. So you mess around with this, do whatever you want. I'm doing 0.4. And also this keys, this needs to be an array. So the reason we use memo is because I also need to, right here, having a dependency array, local notes. So the reason we use memo right here is because every single time this component re-renders, it's creating this new thing every single time. And that is unnecessary. So we use the use memo so that this function only gets recreated when the local notes change. So this just makes it a little bit more efficient. So now we can come to our filter notes and we can say search, if there is a search text, then we're going to say fuse.search and we're going to pass in the search text. And then we're going to say .map, and we're just going to return the result, or for each result, we're going to return the result.item. And if there is not search text, then we're just going to simply return the local notes. And so now if we come down here in our sidebar menu, we can say for all of the filtered notes, we're going to map through each note, and we're going to return a sidebar menu item. We're going to say a key equals note.id, and we're going to give this a class name of group/item. And I'll explain why we do that in a second. And so in here, we're going to have a couple of components. We're going to have select note button. And this expects the note. And then we're also going to have a delete note button. And so we need to create these components. So the reason why we have this group item is because we are going to make this delete button. You're not going to be able to see this unless you're hovering over the entire thing. So basically this has dynamic CSS that relies on us hovering over the group rather than this itself. So basically in here, we're going to say group hover, then do something. We're also going to pass in a function of this called delete note locally. And the reason we do this is because when we delete the note, it's going to delete it on the database. What we could do is just have it refresh and there would be no need for this, but that is a lot of unnecessary overhead. So this simple function is just going to remove that note from this list when we delete it. So we're going to say const delete note locally, and it's going to want the note ID. And we're going to say set local notes exactly to that. So basically it's just going to filter through all the notes and it's going to say, we only want notes that don't equal this note ID. So now we need to create these two buttons. All right, so let's just create both of these components and then we will fill them in. So we're going to create select note button.tsx rfce, and then we're going to say type props equals, I believe it's note ID, which is a string, and then we're going to say note ID props. We'll save that. This is also going to be a client component, so we're going to say use client. Okay, it is the note, not the note ID. So instead of note ID, this is going to be note. This is going to be of type note, which we import from Prisma. And so now we can import this, get rid of that error, and then we'll add the delete note button. So we'll come right here, delete note button.tsx rfce. This is a client component, type props equals note, or is this just note ID? It's the whole note. Okay. Okay, this should actually be note ID. And then right here, we're going to pass a note.id. So we'll come over here. This is expecting note ID, which is a string. And then also delete note locally, which is going to be a function like that. And then we're going to pass that in. And now we come over here and we import this and we still have an error. This, we don't need this. Okay, so now we can see that this is appearing twice, which is exactly what we would expect because we have two notes. And if we look at them, one of them is empty and one of them says, this is our note. So we can see if this works. Yep. But then if I do a bunch of crazy stuff, yeah. Okay, so this is working. We'll test it a little bit more later when we can actually see what's in there. But our search functionality is working. Also, real quick, let's go into the header. And then right here, we're going to put the sidebar trigger. And we're going to give this a class name. We're going to say absolute left one, top one. And so now we have this button right here to toggle the sidebar. All right, so let's go to the select note button. We'll do that first. So the first thing we're going to want the note ID, which we will get from use search params. We'll get note ID. Otherwise, this is going to be an empty string. And then we're going to say const note text. We're going to rename this to selected note text. And this is going to equal use note. And the reason we call this selected note text is because this is going to be the component for every single one of these on the side. And so that's confusing calling this note text because it's like, is it the note text for this specific one? No, it's the global one. So that's why it's the selected note text, the one that we are looking at. And then right here, I'm going to say const blank note text equals, and we'll say empty note. This is what's going to be displayed if the note has no text. And then we'll say let note text equals local note text, otherwise blank note text. And I need to come up here and I need to say use state local note text. And we're going to set this equal to note.text. And we're going to write some use effects right here that's going to do some kind of weird stuff. So I'm going to explain that in a second. So right here below this, we're going to say if, and we're going to say should be global note text. Then the note text is going to equal selected note text, otherwise blank note text. So I had to do a lot of this weird stuff because what would happen is when I would click on a note on the sidebar, it would flash the text of the global state when we didn't want that yet because this was not yet changed to the note we just clicked. So let's say we were on note 1. When I clicked on note 2, it says, okay, note 2, you should show the global note text. But the global note text would not be set until a fraction of a second after that. So it would, if we were on note 1 and we clicked note 2, it would flash note 1 for a second and then do note 2. So I have to do all these weird use effects right here to fix that problem. So right here, we're going to have some use state. We're going to say should use global note text. And we're going to set this to false. And then right here, we're going to have a use effect. And in the dependency array, we're going to have note ID and note.id. And we're going to say if note ID equals note.id, then we're going to say set should use global note text to true. Else, we're going to set it to false. And then I spelled this incorrectly right here. And then we also have to use one more use effect right here. Use effect. And we're going to say if should use global note text, then set local note text to that. And then we're going to say if selected note text or should use global note text change, then we're going to run this right here. This is the most confusing part of the entire app. It's probably not the cleanest or the best solution, but this is what I came up with. It works. It makes the UI look very good. So we're just going to go with that. So now we can come down and we can start styling this. So we're going to say sidebar, menu, button, and we're going to say as child. And then we're going to give this a class name and we're going to put some dynamic stuff in here. So use squiggly braces and backticks. And we're going to say items start. We're going to say a gap of 0, a padding right of 12. And then we're going to say note.id equals note.id. If that is the case, then we're going to say bg sidebar accent /50. Otherwise, we're just going to show nothing. And otherwise, this is just going to be a blank string. Actually, we could go like this, which would be a little bit cleaner. So we're just going to do the ampersand instead of the ternary. And then in here, we're going to say link. So each of these buttons is going to actually be a link. And then we're going to say, let's see if that's accurate. Hold on, let's close this thing off. This class name is not what we want. We want flex height of fit, flex call. That href is correct. And then in here, we're going to have a p tag. We're going to give this a class name. We're going to say width of full, overflow, hidden, truncate, text, ellipsis, and then white space, no wrap. And the reason we do that is so if the text is super long, it's going to end right here and have like a ... at the end. And so right in here, we're going to have the note text. And so now we can see this is starting to look more reasonable. We can come down here, add another p tag, and in here is going to be note.updated at to local date string. And then we can also add some styling to this. Text extra small. And then we're going to say text muted foreground. And that is it for this. Now we need to go to this delete note button. All right, so we're going to go to Shadcn and we're going to go to alert dialog. We're going to add this. And then the reason I come here is because we're just going to use all of this code. Most of it is going to be the same. So we can come right here and paste this in. Also get all of these, paste these in. And then we're just going to make a few changes. Right here, this is going to be as child. And instead of this saying open, we're going to say this is a button. We need to import this from Shadcn. And it's going to be a trash to icon. And then in this button, we're going to add a class name. We're going to say absolute. We're going to say right to top 1/2 minus translate y 1/2. Got to spell translate right. Translate. We're going to say size of 7, padding of 0, opacity of 0. And then we're going to say group dash hover slash item. And it will be an opacity of 100. And the reason we have to use this group hover slash item is because there's something in this sidebar thing that's like using group and it's doing all this weird stuff. So I had to set this to a specific group to be group slash item. And then also one more thing I need to do is, this is like the one annoying thing about Shadcn is the buttons. He has this weird thing in there that makes the all SVGs default to size 4. And you have to override it by typing in this. And then you set that to whatever size you want. And then right here, we're going to say variant ghost. And so let's see what this looks like. Boom. This is now looking pretty good. So you hover over this, it looks good. And then you hover over the delete, and then this dialog pops up. So this is going to say, we're going to say, are you sure you want to delete this note? And then we're going to say, this action cannot be undone. This will permanently delete your note from our servers. And then this is going to be the same. And then this, instead of saying continue, we're going to say is pending, which we're going to use transition up here to delete this note because we're going to use a server action to do that. We're going to say if it's is pending, then we're going to use loader2, and we're going to say class name, animate, spin. Otherwise, it's just going to say delete. And then we're going to say on click is going to be handle, delete, note. And then we'll add a class name. We'll say a width of 24, background, destructive text, destructive foreground. We'll say hover, BG, destructive /90. And so now we need this handle delete note. So we'll come right here, const handle delete note. This does not need to be async because we're going to use transition. And from that, we're going to get is pending and start transition. And then this, when we do the start transition, that is going to be async. So we're going to say const error message is going to equal await delete note action, which we have to write, and we'll pass in the note ID. And then we'll say if there's no error message, we're going to use some toast. So let's come up here. Let's import some toast with a couple of other things we're going to need. So we're going to say const router equals use router from next navigation. We're going to get our toast from use toast. And then we're also going to say note ID param equals use search params. And then we're going to get the note ID because we're going to say if you deleted the note that is being shown, then we have to do something a little bit different. So for this error message, or if there's not an error, we're going to say toast. We're going to say title, note deleted. You've successfully deleted this note. Yes, success. That's exactly what we want. And then delete note locally will run right after that. And then we're going to say if note ID equals note ID param, then we're going to say router.replace, and we're just going to send it to the home route. And we're going to write some middleware that makes it so that if there is a user and it's at the home route, it's automatically going to send them to a route that has one of their note IDs. If they don't have any notes, then it's going to create a note and then send them to that route. So we'll handle that in the middleware in a second. So this is what happens if there's not an error message. If there is an error message, we're just going to say there's an error. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to delete this because we don't need this anymore. And then let's write this delete note action. So we'll come up here and we'll just copy and paste one that we've already done. Delete note action. It's just the note ID that we need. You must be logged into delete a note. We'll say delete. And then also we're going to say author ID is user ID, so you can't delete someone else's note. So now if we go to the delete note button, we can import this and this should now work. So if I delete this, are you sure you want to delete this? Delete, boom, it's gone. Let's go to our database. We can see it is also gone from the database. And so now we can create a new note. This is a dope new note. We can see, boom, it just did it. And so now we can create, read, update, delete. So now we're going to add that middleware I was talking about, and then we will be ready to add the AI part to this. So let's go over to this middleware file, and we're going to uncomment all of this out, and we're going to get rid of this. And then the first thing we're going to do, so it's actually, well, yes, we'll need that in a second. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to say const is auth route. If the user's logged in, they can't go to the login or the sign up page. So we're going to say equals request.nextURL.pathname equals /login, or if it equals sign-up. So if either of these are the case, then it is an auth route. We'll say if is auth route. Then we're going to say, well, then we're going to use this right here. We're going to see if there's a user. And then we'll say, if there is a user, return next response dot redirect. And it's going to be a new URL. And we're just going to send them to the home page. And we're going to say process.env.next public base URL. So we added this at the very beginning to our env variables. So make sure you have this. When we deploy this, we're going to set this to the actual name of the website. So now this part is working. So if you're logged in, so now we can actually just test this real quick. So we are obviously logged in. If we come over here and I go to the login, nope, the middleware is going to redirect us. All right, so now what we're going to do is, if the URL has no user ID, then it's going to try to automatically go to their newest note. If they don't have any notes, then it's going to create a note. So we're going to say const search params and the path name. We're going to get that from the URL. And then we're going to say if there are no search params dot get note ID, and the path name is the home route because we don't want this to happen on the login pages. Then we're going to get the user. And you might be wondering, well, if we use the user right here and right here, why don't we just do this once? Well, it's because we don't want to call this every single time the route changes. We only want to call it when we absolutely have to. So if it's an auth route, we have to do it. If there's no search params, we have to do it. Most of the time when you're using this app, neither of these cases are going to happen. So that's just unnecessarily calling this over and over when we don't actually need it. So we're going to say, if there is a user. So we're saying, if there is no node ID in the search params and we're on the home screen and there's a user, then we need to do something. We need to set a node ID up here. So the first thing we're going to do is check, does this user have any notes? So we're going to say const newest note ID is going to equal await fetch And so we're going to write an API endpoint for this to work, because I would like to just use Prisma directly in here, but with the way Prisma is set up, you can't use Prisma in middleware, because middleware in Next.js operates in an edge environment, which is slightly different than a typical Node.js environment. So we can't call Prisma directly in here. So we're going to create an API endpoint and just call that API endpoint. So that's exactly what we're doing now. We're going to say process.env.next public base URL. And then we're going to say /API/fetch newest note user ID equals user.id. And then we're going to say then res.json. So we're going to go write that route in a second. So we're going to say if newest note ID, if there is the newest note ID, then we're going to say const URL equals request.nextURL.clone. And then we're going to say URL.searchParam set node ID to the newest node ID. And then we're going to return next response dot redirect to the URL. So it's first going to see, do they have one? If they do, then just send them to that. If they don't have a newest node ID, that means they have no notes yet. We're going to have to create a new note for them. So we're going to say const note ID equals await. This is actually going to be very similar to this. So I'm going to copy this, paste this, and instead of fetch newest note, this is going to be create new note. And this is going to be a post request. So we need to specify that. And so this, we're going to create this route that creates the node ID, and then we'll be able to get the URL, do exactly what we just did up there, and then redirect them. So now we're going to create these routes. So we're going to come here to app. We're going to create a new file. We're going to go API/create new note/route.ts. And then we're going to say export async function. This is a post request. This is how you do this in the app router. We're going to say request next response or request. And then we're going to say const, we're going to get the search params, and we're going to say const user ID is going to equal the user ID from the search params, otherwise a string. And then we're going to use Prisma right here. We're going to get the ID from await Prisma, import that .note.create, and we're going to pass in the data of the author ID, which is the user ID, and then the text is just going to be blank. And then now we can return a next response.json, and this is just going to be the note ID, which is the ID. And we need to import next response. So now this is set up. We can copy this, come to API, create a new file, call it fetch newest note/route.ts, paste this. This is going to be a get request. And then instead of this, this is going to be newest note ID. And we're going to find first. We're going to get rid of all this, and we're going to say where author ID is the user ID. We also want to order it, put it in order so that it is going to get the most recent note. And then all we want this to return is the ID. And then we're going to come right here. We're going to call this newest note ID. And then this is going to actually return an object. So we're going to go like that, .id. And this might not be there. Okay, so now this middleware should work. So we see this is a dope new note. If we get rid of this and go to this route, boom, our middleware works. If we delete this and then delete this, there's no notes, boom, just created a new note. So the middleware is set up, everything is set up. Now we're going to create this AI button so that we can talk to a large language model about our notes. All right, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to head over to the AskAIButton component, and we're going to get this thing dialed. So we're going to go over to Shadcn. We're going to go to dialog. Let's see. We're going to add this. I don't think I added something properly, so okay. We're gonna add this dialog. Gonna wait for that. Could ask us some questions. Okay, we got the dialog. Now we can get this code and we are going to copy this. And then we're gonna head over here and we're gonna paste it. We're also going to copy all of this and paste this. And so now we've got this. Here's our dialog. We're going to tailor this to the AI situation. So right here, we're going to say use state. We're going to say open, set this to false. Right here, we're going to say open equals open. And then right here, we're going to say on open change. And we're going to say const handle on open change. And this is going to expect is open, which is a Boolean. And so when we pass this in here, this on open change is going to pass in the new state. So right here, we're going to get the new state. So we're going to say if there's not a user, we're going to say router.push. We're going to send them to the login screen. So let's come up here. Let's get the router, use router from next navigation. And so we're good on that. If there's not a user, do that. Otherwise, we're going to say if is open, we're going to do some things, but we'll do that in a second. But regardless, we're going to set open to is open. What we're going to do in here is we're going to have some state where we're going to show all the questions and the answers. So we can create that state right here. We're going to say use state, and we're going to say question text. And that is just going to be an empty string. And then we're going to get questions. And that is going to be an array of strings to add the brackets right there. And then right here is going to be responses. And so basically how we're going to send this information to the AI is we're going to, every single time we ask the AI a question, we're going to pass in every single question that we've asked. So it has memory of the entire conversation. And then we're also going to pass every single response. So it knows everything about the conversation. So we're going to say, if it's open, we're going to set question text to a blank string, set questions, and set responses to an empty string. So basically, every time we open this, we're going to reset it. That's fucking great. We're also going to need a use transition. And we're going to get the is pending and the start transition. And then also we're going to need a couple of refs. So we're going to say text area ref is going to equal use ref, which is going to be like this. And then we're going to say const content ref, which is going to be like this. We're also going to have a function called handle input, and we're going to say const text area equals text area ref dot current. And we're going to say if there's no text area, then we're going to return. Otherwise, we're going to say text area style auto and this. And so the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to have a text area where we ask the question, and we need this to make sure the text area grows if we go to another line. We're also going to have a function called const handle click input. And what this function is going to do is when we click anywhere in what appears to be the text area, it's going to bring focus to the actual text area. You'll see in a second the way I style it. The actual text area is only a small part of the entire thing. So this makes it so anywhere you click, it's going to bring focus. And this is very simple. This is just text area ref dot current. You just simply bring focus. So we're going to have a few more functions. We're going to say const handle submit. And we will write this one in a second. This is going to be the one that actually does all the stuff for us. We're also going to have something called scroll to bottom. So when we get new responses, it's going to automatically scroll to the bottom. And that is correct right there. And then we're also going to say handle key down so that when the user presses enter, it's going to submit it. And that looks good as well. And for now, for this handle submit, we'll just say log submit. And so now we can get this styled. This looks nothing like how we want it. So for the dialog trigger, we're going to have a button. It is going to be secondary, and this is going to say Ask AI. And for the dialog content, we're going to change this styling, and we're going to give it a custom scroll bar. Yes, we also do want to add the content ref to this. We need to add a little bit more styling as well. We're going to say flex. We're going to say height of 85 VH, which is basically 85% of the screen height. We're going to say max width 4XL. We're going to say flex call. And then we're going to say overflow Y auto, which just is going to make it so it will scroll if there's a lot of content. For the dialog title, we're going to say Ask AI about your notes. For the description, we're going to say our AI can answer questions about all of your notes. No period. So now we can get rid of pretty much all of this. This is going to be way different. And we can also get rid of this footer. So we can come up here, delete that footer. Okay. What is this thing that says text? Yes, get rid of that. So right here, we're going to have a div. And in this div, we're going to have the questions. We're going to map through all of the questions. This is basically going to be the chat that we see. So we're going to go through all of the questions. And we're going to get a React fragment. We're going to import that from React. We're going to say key equals question. We're actually just going to set this to index, which you shouldn't typically do that, but that's going to be fine. And then we're going to have a p tag, and this is going to have the question. And then for each question, we're also going to say if there's a response to that question. So we're going to say responses index. If there is a response at that index, then we're going to have a self-closing p tag, and I'll explain why. So first, let's set this class name. We're going to have something called bot response. This is going to be some custom CSS, and then we're going to say text small, text muted, foreground. And so when we talk to the AI, we tell the AI, we tell it that we are going to be formatting it as HTML. So every answer it gives it to us in an HTML format. And then how we are going to display it is by saying dangerously set inner HTML to this. So the AI is going to know to respond not just with a string, but with HTML formatted stuff. And so this is how it's done. And then we also need to add some styling to this p tag. So we're going to say margin left of auto, a max width of 60%, rounded medium, background muted, padding X of 2, padding Y of 1, text small, and then text muted foreground. And then we also want to add a little styling to this. We'll say a margin top of 4, flex call, gap of 8. So it looks like nothing because there's nothing in there. And then also what we're going to do is below this, we're going to say is pending. So while we ask the question, we're waiting for the response. We're going to have a p tag, and it's just going to say thinking. And then we're going to give it a class name. We're going to say animate pulse text of small. And so below all of this is where the text box is going to be. This is where we ask the questions. So we're going to give it a class name. We're going to say margin top of auto, flex, cursor, text, flex call, rounded large, border, and a padding of 4. We're also going to say on click, handle, click input. And inside of this, we're going to have a text area that we import from Shadcn. And then we're going to say ref equals text area ref. Placeholder is going to say ask me anything about your notes. And then for the class name, we're going to have resize is none, rounded none, border none, background transparent, a padding of 0, shadow none, placeholder is going to be text muted foreground. We're going to say focus visible. We're going to have a ring of 0. And then focus visible again. We're going to say ring offset 0. And then we're also going to say style. And we're going to give it a min height of 0. And then we're going to say line height of normal. We're going to say rows of 1. We're going to say on input, handle input. We're going to say on key down, handle key down. We're going to say value is question text. And we're going to say on change is that. And then below this, we're going to have a button. And that button is going to have an arrow up icon. And we're going to say text background. And then this button, we're going to say class name margin left auto. We're going to say size of 8. And we're going to say rounded full. So now this is looking pretty good. And so when we ask the questions, it's going to show our question up here. The response, it's just going to look pretty much like ChatGPT. So now we can remove these as well. We're not going to use these. We just have to write the code for the handle submit. So let's do that right now. We're going to say if there's not question text dot trim return. So if there's nothing, just don't even do anything. Then we're going to say const new questions equals ... questions, all the current ones plus the current question text. And then we're going to set questions to that. We're going to set question text to blank. And then we're going to set a timeout and we're going to scroll to bottom. And the reason we want to do this set timeout is because if we scroll to bottom immediately, the new questions are not yet there. So it's going to say, okay, I'm going to scroll to bottom and then the new questions get added. We want the questions to get added first so that the height is larger and then we scroll to the bottom. So that's why we have this slight delay. And then we're going to start the transition async. And we're going to say const response equals await ask AI about notes action. We're going to write this server action in a second. We're going to pass in the new questions and the responses. And then we're going to set the responses to the previous responses plus the new one. And then we're also going to set timeout, scroll to bottom after 100 milliseconds. We do this again right here because when we submit it, the question is going to pop up right there, which makes the screen a little bit higher. And then when we get the response, we're going to want to do the same thing. So now we need to write this function right here. So we're going to come to actions. We're going to come to notes and we're going to say export const ask AI about, what is it called? Ask AI about notes action. Actually, we're going to go like this, and then we're going to copy this, paste it. And this is expecting new questions and responses, which are just arrays of strings. So we're going to put this right here. This is an array of strings, and this is also an array of strings. So we're going to get rid of this, and then we're going to say you must be logged in to ask AI questions, And then we're going to save this. So now we can come back to our button and we can import this and we can save this. And so this thing is, and so the reason we have this error is because we need to make this function so it always returns a string and it is not currently set up like. So the first thing we're going to want to do in here is we're going to fetch some notes from Prisma. So we're going to fetch all of our notes. So we're going to say notes and we're going to say find many. And then we're going to say where author ID is user ID. We're also going to order them by created at in descending order. And then we only want the text when it was created and when it was updated. This is just going to give the AI a little bit more context. So you could say, I was asking a question months ago, whatever. So this is just going to give it a little more information. So then right here, we can say if notes.length equals 0, not, oh yeah, I have to come right here, say const notes equals, if notes length equals 0, and we're going to return a string that just says, you don't have any notes yet. If there are notes, then we're going to format the notes in a way that the AI can understand very easily. So we're going to say const formatted notes equals notes.map. And for each note, we're going to return a string. And it's going to start on a new line, and it's going to say text. And we're going to say note.text. Actually, what we're going to do is we're not going to put that. We're just going to go like this. We're going to press enter, and then we're going to just format it like this. So we're going to say text is note.text, created at, updated at. Well, actually, we're going to say last updated. And then we're going to come here and we're going to say dot join, because this is going to create an array of all of these strings. And we want them to be joined by a new line. We also want to right here add this trim, because otherwise it's going to include all of this, which we don't want. So now we have our formatted notes. And now this is the part where we're actually going to tell the AI what to do. We're going to create the prompt. So I'm just going to paste this in. You can get this from the GitHub repo. So you should use ChatGPT and explain exactly what you are looking for and say, help me write a very good prompt. So it says, you're a helpful assistant that answers questions about notes, blah, blah, blah. I said, make sure your answers are not too verbose and speak succinctly, because you get charged per token of output. And so for this example, I don't want it to be rambling. I just want the answers to be very short. And so this is what I was talking about. I say, use tags like p tag, whatever, whatever. Or I said, your response must be formatted as HTML, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, this is exactly how it's going to be rendered. So now it totally understands exactly what we're looking for. And then at the very end, I say, here are the user's notes. And then I pass in all of these formatted notes. So every time we ask it a question, it's going to know this every single time. And we need to get this type. So we need to say pm add OpenAI. So once we do that, we can import this. This is where the import comes from. And I forgot we have to set up the connection with OpenAI. So we will do that right now. So in the source, we're going to say a new file called OpenAI/index.ts. And this is very simple. We're going to import OpenAI, not from that, but just from OpenAI. And then we're going to say const OpenAI equals new OpenAI. And then we're going to say API key equals that. And then we're going to export default OpenAI. So now when we make the call to the AI, we will be able to do that. So we're going to come back over here to the notes. And before we make the call, we need to add all of the questions and responses to this, because we're going to pass in this thing right here, this array of this to the AI. So we need to say for let I. So yeah, this is exactly what we want. So we're going to go through all of the questions. We're going to say messages.push, and you have to put the role. Is it the user? Is it the assistant? Or in this case, this one is the developer. This is the only one that's the developer. And then we're going to say the content is new questions, that one. And for this, we're actually also going to say if responses dot length is greater than I, then we will do this. And so now our messages is going to be a bunch of objects like this with all of the questions and all the responses. And so now all we have to do is say const completion equals await OpenAI. We're going to import that chat.completions.create. And then we select the model. I looked at all of the models and all the prices, and GPT 4.0 4.0 mini is actually cheaper than the Model 3 version. So this is pretty much the cheapest one. This is fast. This is good. And then we pass in the messages. And then right here, we're going to return completion dot choices 0 message content. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to say a problem has occurred. And then we're also going to get rid of this, this, and this, and get rid of this try. And so now, if we set this all up correctly, this should work. But also, one thing we need to add is this CSS file. So go to the GitHub repo and get this and just add this to your styles. And then we're going to go to the AskAIButton component and we're going to import this. And so this now knows, because Next.js, if you do an H1 or a P tag, it doesn't style it any differently. So this gives it just like basically your standard styling on the web. So if we set this all up correctly, let's just refresh this. Let's say, let's just make a real note real quick. Also follow Cole, let's see, at Cole Blender on X. So these are our notes. Let's ask AI. Tell me about my notes. Let's see if this works. So it's thinking, it's thinking. It says your note summary. It knows about my notes. Boom. We have now set this entire app up. Everything is working correctly. Now we are going to deploy it using GitHub and Vercel. All right. So the first thing we need to do is create a GitHub repo and add all this code there. So we're going to go to github.com and we are going to go to my profile. Actually, no, we're going to click new and we're going to call this repository, whatever we want. I'm going to call it Goat Notes. And then we're going to create the repository. Owner is Cole Blender. We're going to create the repository. And then what we're going to do is push an existing repository because this Next.js automatically initializes Git. So we're going to paste that. We're going to click enter. Okay, the reason that didn't work, I have to first say git add, period, add everything, git commit. We'll say -m. We'll just say done. And then now, because I already ran this, this is going to work. So now I can just say git push. And this repo is now, if we refresh this, boom, we got this repo set up. Okay, we've got this set up. Now we're going to go over to Vercel, add new project. And I've already hooked this up to my GitHub. So it sees right here, Goat Notes. It knows I added it there 60 seconds ago. So we're going to import this and then we're just going to click deploy. Actually, I want to add these environment variables, but we can do that in a second. So we're actually going to go over here to the environment variables. We're going to copy all of those. And then once this is done, I'm going to show you how to add the environment variables. And then this is going to be on the internet. So I got this error right here. So what I need to do is come back to this ESLint file and let me see if this is correct. All right. So what I just did was I went to this ESLint file and I added this line right here. And then what I also did is I went to the environment variables. I copied all of them. You come over here. All you have to do is click right here and click paste. And it's automatically going to fill all of this out like this for you. Okay, so when I deploy this, I keep getting all these ESLint rule violations. In order for this to work, what we have to do is in the build script, it says next build. What we have to do is add pnpm dlx prisma generate, because if we don't do that, then it's not going to have the types and it's going to have some linting rule when you try to push this. If you're using npm, then this would be npx prisma generate. So boom, it's on the internet. Let's continue to dashboard. And then now, so we have, what we need to do is I need to go to this. I need to take this URL and then I need to go to settings. I need to go to environment variables. And then I need to change this next public base, whatever, to this. And then I need to save that. And then this is not going to take effect until the next push. So let's see. So we just got to make a small change. I'm going to get rid of this. And then I'm going to say get ACP, whatever. Okay, this is a new push. And now this is automatically going to do a new build. So we can see new build. It's automatically going to deploy the new version when that's done. So hopefully that doesn't fail. We'll see. All right. So that worked. Let's go check the website out. And let's try to log in and see if everything works. Successfully logged in. Okay. Now I'm able to successfully log in for whatever reason. I don't know why this happened, but the environment variable for my database URL had some like weird character in it. So I don't know if that's going to happen to you or not, but as you can see, our website's on the internet and we're good to go. If you want to add a custom domain, I have a video linked below. It's like 2 minutes long. It's going to show you how to use Namecheap and Vercel so you can make this website have any name that you want, as long as it's not already taken. So there it is. If you learned something, subscribe. You want to learn some more? Watch this video right here. See you next time.